This is AV Week, Friday, September 2nd, 2011. Brundlefly.
Ready.
AV Week.
Performing scan.
Week.
Online.
This is AV Week. AV Week. It is time again for AV Week, your weekly wrap-up of news and commentary for the AV industry. I'm your host, Tim Albright. With us today is George Tucker. He is the engineering coordinator for World Stage. Hello, George.
Good afternoon, all.
Also with us today for the first time, Bradford Benn. Bradford is an application expert for Harman International. Hello, Bradford.
Hello, all. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Welcome. And with me in studio is Michael Drainer. He is from Tech Electronics in St. Louis, Missouri.
Welcome.
Welcome. I just welcomed you.
I know.
Okay,
it just sounded cool.
We're going to kick it off real quick on a conversation and continue it from Twitter and also Google+. What the basic question is this: AMX versus Crestron. George, we're going to start with you, not only from a product standpoint, but also from customer service and other standpoints. AMX versus Crestron.
Well, I'm going to be a little bit careful here, although I've been known to have no humility. So,
all right, just for really quickly, I'm not going to be careful, so you go ahead.
Okay. Well, the reason being, as you may or well not know, is that I used to work for one of the individual companies listed. And only recently have I been in new employment. So my comments are going to be they're going to be weighted, actually in a good way towards Crestron. My personal opinion about the differences between them really comes down to two things. I really like a lot of the AMX stuff. I think on episode 1 or 2 we talked about Infocom and about how much I was in love with those long-form Modero panels. Those little, very little rectangular things that were just awesome to use.
The edgeless panel.
Yeah, the edgeless panels that come in that very strange format. I forget what the actual ratio of them was, but they were sort of more rectangular than they were, square or even 16 by 9. Having had experience with both outside as a dealer integrator and from the inside of at least one of them, that is Crestron, my personal opinion on this is that Crestron's service and its support structure is, if not far superior, is more proactive. They do a lot of work to try to get people involved in the resolution process rather than saying, we'll get back to you, or that's an engineering question. They really do make an effort to train the guys in not just the technology, but in the ability to teach and train customers via a phone. One of the things that we came up with in the very beginning, or they came up with what we instituted when I was one of the managers in tech support, was what we have to remember is that you're not seeing what the client's seeing. And we have to impart to the client or the person needing support on the phone that we need them to describe things in a more detail, and we need to verify it in a way that doesn't sound like a script, but that you're still verifying. Because what you see in your head and what they're describing are not always the same thing. And it becomes a very difficult process, especially in early days of getting wireless or Ethernet into the integrators, especially the residential integrators' hands, was, all right, how do you set this up? And them trying to figure out, and us teach them on the phone sometimes, how you change a subnet and what that means. Okay, you're using which product? It was XYZ product, say Linksys. Okay, we know that in our head. I'm going to take you through the steps to get to where I need you to be. And you don't have time as a support person to always be able to get up the Linksys help page to show you where to go. So a lot of it's that sort of being able to see in your mind what should be, and even if you don't know the product, be able to direct that end client on the other end of the phone to where they need to be to get this resolution done. And in my experience, that's been a major benefit of Crestron. The hardware seems to be, to me, much more varied for Crestron, and you have much more choice into being able to fit a specific I'm struggling for words, a specific value for that sale. So they have a wide berth of products for whatever sales point you need.
Yeah. So when it comes to customer service and also from a variety of products standpoint, you would say that it's Crestron over AMX. So that's one for Crestron. Bradford, go ahead.
No, I just want to make the point of the Made in America.
Yeah.
What AMX really is, but I'm not sure it's the same level.
Okay. Bradford, do you have an opinion one way or the other? I know you work for Harman, mostly audio gear, but do you have an opinion one way or the other when it comes to Crestron versus AMX?
Yeah, I come at this slightly a little differently because I'm used to working with them on the other side of manufacturer to manufacturer and also more in the commercial market than in the residential market. And my experience has been that AMX has been easier for me to work with than Crestron as a manufacturer. Also, when I was a contractor many, many years ago, like last century, I had better experiences with AMX, but that was before the whole Panja publicly held company. So, that is, in technology terms, many years ago. But from a supporting customers that are mutual customers of ours, I've had more success with AMX than I have with Crestron. There seems to be a little more ownership of the problem and working to get it solved, rather than saying it's manufacturer A versus manufacturer B. It's just, we don't care, let's go solve the problem with AMX, which I don't get that same feeling with Crestron. So that's just, like I said, that's from a different side point of, manufacturer to manufacturer. I can't comment on what it's like being out in the field because oftentimes I'm talking to engineers, not to the frontline tech support guys.
Okay. So one-on-one, Michael, you are an integrator. You feel free and be as careful as you would like, sir. AMX versus Crestron.
We are a dealer for one of the said companies and are aspiring to become a dealer for one of the other said companies. And you and I have had multiple conversations, you being one of my end users, about your preferences and why you prefer one over the other.
We'll get to that in a second.
Those sentiments are definitely shared amongst many of my customer base. Let's just say tech support is free with Crestron. Mm-hmm. I don't have to sell you a service contract. I don't have to maintain that contract, although it would be nice revenue to do so as an integrator. But from the end user's perspective, and that's really what we're here for, is the end user, it's much easier to deal with a company that I can pick up the phone and just say, I have a CP2E, here's my problem, help me solve it, and they'll solve it. No questions asked, no ands, if, ors, or buts. Let's get it resolved. And I don't get that level of support from AMX. The first question is, what's your support contract number? Then they check to make sure it's current. And, I understand those issues, but at the same time, I'm here for the customer and the end user. And it's all about the end user experience at the end of the day. Because the fact of the matter is the AV integrator is not always going to be there. There's going to be times when the customer has to call that tech support line themselves and resolve those issues, whether or not they're a programmer.
Yeah.
And I know you've got some words to say about that.
Well, so yours is Crestron, so it's
well in that capacity. Now, that being said, I like a lot of the AMX products. I'm a big fan of a lot of the products, and I've got customers who are fans of the products. But when it comes down to the final decision, they're weighing all the options. It's, will the Crestron product do what I need it to do? A, where's the price point, and what's the support system like?
Okay, so you're split.
I'm split.
You're Switzerland.
I'm split down the middle.
I'm not Switzerland, and I'll get this going right now. I make no bones about this in any way, shape, or form. I have no use or no. I've never had a good experience with an AMX product or an AMX problem. I've had nothing but good experiences with Crestron. That is the one thing I'll say. I'm not going to sit here and bash one or the other, but the products I've used for Crestron, the people that I've interacted with at Crestron, have all been good experiences to me. Yes, there have been issues, and yes, there have been stuff that hasn't worked. But back to George's point, their customer service, again, from my standpoint as an end user, has been second to none, and I do mean none, regardless of whether it was a switcher manufacturer or a screen dealer. Crestron's customer service really is, in my opinion, one of the best in the industry. AMX, on the other hand, is not. Whether it's needing a service contract and having to pay for customer service, which I think, by the way, is a horrible business plan, is just lacking in so many different areas. And unfortunately, it was probably happened around the same time that they got incorporated. I mean, I could be wrong, but all of this stuff seemed to happen around the time that they got a part of a big corporation. Crestron, as big as it feels like to me they are, still feels like a small company when it comes to dealing with the customer. And I say that because they still care, and that's probably the wrong word, because I don't want to infer that AMX doesn't care about the clients, but they seem to interact more and a little more proactive in their customer service.
Well, and I think what you're getting to, and correct me if I'm wrong, it's about a difference in culture.
Yeah, it is.
Right.
It is.
You've got one that is this corporate giant. They're a publicly traded corporation. They're there about putting, their whole initiative is to put dollars in the pockets of the shareholders. Mm-hmm. That's what keeps them viable. The other one is a privately held corporation that has a very defined set of grassroots values in supporting their customer base. And let's just face the facts. AMX has not done any favors for their dealers to help them promote those products unless you are a huge dealer. And I'm talking, you're doing $1 million a year in control systems and video distribution from that company. You're not getting any additional services and support from them. I mean, I'm getting what the end user gets. So it's difficult for me to provide additional value.
So you have to pay for service too.
Exactly, and I'm not trying to hide it here. I mean, this is a candid conversation I've had with my reps and whatnot. So it's definitely an issue, and it makes it difficult for us to promote the product when we have to jump through hoops. Mm-hmm. To get the support we need for our end users. And
that makes sense. I mean, when it comes to the products, to me, I'm not going to say a touch panel is a touch panel, but basically a touch panel is a touch panel. Yes, AMX has pretty stuff, and yes, they have HD over twisted pair and things of that nature. But when it comes down to I'm spending a lot of money for a control system, I want to be able to service that.
Yeah, I don't think it comes down to one product being superior over the other. I mean, a matrix is a matrix, and they do it a little bit differently. And we could get into the details of arguing the video distribution and whatnot.
Encoding. And
all that stuff. But ultimately, it comes down to the culture of the company, how their vision for the customer is upheld, and how they go to market with that.
So George, how do we do? What do we end up with?
I think we're mostly it's high hardware, and it comes down to customer service, which actually makes a point that that's what's really all about.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And
you can make it better. Go ahead.
As I say, George, I was about to agree with you. It's all about customer service because a lot of the products are becoming so similar, and they all can do the same thing. It's the user experience. And from listening to you guys talk about this, I'm listening to this going, yeah, I think maybe one brand has a better understanding that the Crestron logo that's on the outside of that product or the AMX logo that's on the outside of the product, that's who the end user is going to call, and they're going to do everything they can to make their integrator successful so that they call them back.
And not only that, Bradford, but I've had conversations with some of the guys at Crestron. If this is the sense that I get from them, and I get the sense that if something doesn't work, 9 times out of 10, the control system is blamed, regardless of if it's their fault or not. So this is the sense that I get from at least the culture back, the customer service culture back at Crestron, is they're going to do everything in their power to make sure that works, regardless of if it's their quote unquote problem or not. I just don't get that sense from AMX. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes sense.
Yeah,
I have to.
Oh, go ahead, George.
I have to say that one of the things about the culture in that company, Crestron, was that there was a feeling of, I am Crestron. You had a face, and if you were a support tech, you really do feel that way, and that's what you're given the rah-rah about, is that you are Crestron. And let's not forget that regardless of my dealings with Crestron and my employment at certain points, it is run by it's a paternal thing. There is Mr. George Feldstein, who built the place, who runs it still, and checks up on every part of it as much as he can, and tries to, it's grown exponentially in the last few years. So, he tries to know everybody's name, and there's still that culture. And AMX from day one, at least since I've known about AMX in the late '80s, was still a corporation.
Right.
And it was that very different. Again, gear-wise, they're always head-to-head. There are some differences in the markets that both of them are chasing and the sort of granularity of what type of market and what products they're putting out. But in essence, there's a sort of equality on that level.
Right.
But it really does come down to customer service. Is who am I going to get help from, and which one is more overt about it? And in fact, Crestron is much more overt, from social media to their actual text.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, and I think there's definitely a parallel that can be drawn. And Bradford, you can probably speak to this. That's something that we see with many different manufacturers. JBL, one of the Harman brands, makes sound reinforcement loudspeakers. You've got how many other loudspeaker manufacturers? You work for the amplifier division in the Crown Group. You got QSC, you've got Ashley, you have Electro Voice. You've got a number of manufacturers out there, all capable of doing pretty close to the same thing. It really comes down to preference at the end of the day to the integrator and the end user when they're making those buying decisions. And I think that at the end of the day, that company culture, that level of support, the way you interact with the people has a huge bearing on the decision that you make.
Oh, I agree with you 100%. It's one of the things I've been working very hard with our inside sales team as well as our tech support team of, people buy our products to make money. We need to make it easy for them to do business with us and to be successful and to make money. And I think that that's starting to come around more and more because, like you said, there are many good competitors out there. It comes down to who's the easiest to do business with. I liken it to buying a car. You can buy a car from brand A or brand B. They're both going to get you from point A to point B. But which one's easier? Which one do you like better? Whether it be the guy who greeted you when you came into the showroom or how they take care of the maintenance guy back there versus all these other things. It's the exact same thing. It's the customer experience is much more important nowadays than it used to be, especially with the internet and people talking about what's going well and what's going poorly. And having people take ownership of issues is a key idea. And if like George said, I am Crestron. I take a lot of the attitude of, I am Harman, I am Crown. You call with the problem. It doesn't matter whose problem it is. I'm going to at least get you pointed in the right direction because come game time or whatever event you're shooting up against, if you're not successful, we're not successful.
It's taken on that. Go ahead.
I think a lot of companies, especially publicly held companies, sometimes forget that.
Right.
Yeah,
right.
They do.
It's taking that ownership. It's that ownership and identifying you as the individual as being the company. You are the face of that company. And, I correlate the same thing to my firm. I am Tech Electronics, and that's not from an arrogant standpoint. It's I want to make sure my customers are taken care of. So,
well, and it's no different because all of us have something to sell unless you
Absolutely.
are the final end user, and then you have other customers.
Right.
There is money to be had, and price difference can only cover so much. Mm-hmm. Then, all of us have said this, then it does come down to how you treat the customer and how they feel. Are they happy to open their wallet and write a check?
Right.
So,
right.
All right, on to Apple and the Chinese government, Chinese environmentalist. Something that's kind of come up in the last couple of days. A coalition of Chinese environmental groups is accusing Apple of ignoring some serious problems at some of the factories where its things are put together. But this is from Marketplace. Steve Hahn says that thanks to some stuff, you can seriously track where Apple's environmental footprint. And he says that researchers at the Institute of Public and Environmental Affairs in Beijing found evidence that factories suspected of supplying Apple with parts are poisoning the waterways. George, is this an issue?
This is something that... Well, it's an issue because Apple is one of these companies, and I think they point this out in the Marketplace, a public radio show, Marketplace. They think that Apple is this again, a company that wants to, it has a huge and very tight fan base. The end users are very dedicated to the brand and to the products that the company put out, and to Steve Jobs and crew. But there's such a weird dichotomy with how loving and embracing the end users of Apple are to how closed and non-communicative Apple actually is. And as you said, they said suspected Apple dealers. No one knows who their people are. And I get that from a business point of view. That's fantastic. If only we could have done it, right? If only some of us could have kept that kind of monopoly on what's going on. But you have to be transparent in this. We know that there's been issues in China. Good gosh, do we know that there's been
yes.
issues in China with that kind of stuff, and everything from the baby food to the tainted milk to the... And there's an issue here, and do we want... We react in horror at it, and yet here we are purchasing a product that may be sponsoring something very similar. It's poisoning the water of the river. How far down the river does it go? What happened to the village just outside of that manufacturing district? Are those people getting cancer, dying, or being just severely injured by it? There has to be some accountability to this. Now, I'm hoping that this is not as bad as, say, Bhopal, India, with I forget who the chemical company was that had that leak of cyanide.
Union Carbide.
Union Carbide. That's right. They've renamed themselves, I think. But
yeah,
you want that openness from a product that you love so much, that you adore this, and you wait for the iOS 5, and you want to see that white iPhone, and you want to believe that company has some kind of generosity and attentiveness to what it's doing beyond making a profit or the best gear. There has to be that line of, we make fantastic stuff, but at what cost? And if it comes down to being at what cost, I wonder what a lot of people will do. Will they just shrug it off and go, I don't care? Or are they going to say, that gives me pause. Maybe I will look at somebody else's tablet and see if I can
make it work,
grow with the ecosystem. Yeah.
Well, I want to I agree with a lot with what you're saying, George, but I literally bought a new Mac last week. And in that week since then, Apple has reached out multiple times to me to make sure I had a good experience. So we're going back to customer experience. But the new one that I hadn't seen before was that, I just experienced was how much they're pushing, how green they are, and cradle to grave processes in their system. But also, I got an email asking me if I wanted to recycle my old electronics through them at no additional charge.
Oh, wow.
And so it's kind of like what has me giving me pause is are they playing green for political and advertising purposes and then on the backside being bad citizens? Or is it just they hired a manufacturer over there, and because the manufacturer isn't officially an Apple company, man, I'm going to get fired if I
yeah, you are.
But because they're an Apple company, they're not an Apple company. It's an independent contractor that Apple can say, we don't know anything about it. We just buy parts from them. And there's that certain disconnect that I wonder about as to how much they're actually taking complete ownership of the product and how much of it is just they're taking control of the marketing of their product. And I think that's going to be the fallout of this is more what's the company versus what's the product.
Well, and it's plausible deniability for them. They are really, really big in the art community and in the video community. I mean, you can't go into most production houses without seeing a majority of Macs, and so it may very well be more marketing, or it may just be where they say, what our manufacturers do is between them and the government and God. I don't know.
And, I think that a lot of companies are doing that, especially in China, because of the fact that you don't own the manufacturer. It's a contract manufacturer. It's just the same as if you hired someone to paint your house. Yeah. You don't know what they're doing with the paint when they're done painting your house, and how many of us really ask if we hire a painter?
Yeah, it's a supply chain issue. I mean, even if you put the cradle to grave processes in place, you're never going to be able to source 100% of everything that you need to manufacture a product. And it's going to come down to how much influence does Apple have over their supply chain or their component providers. How much clout do they have with those individuals, and whether or not they're going to be able to get control of this thing. Because I don't think that they're inherently a bad company. I mean, who knows? Anything is possible. But I doubt that they're coming in the morning saying, hey, we're going to pitch this line and tell everybody we're a green company and then we're going to pollute the waters and kill all the children in China. I don't find that to be a realistic expectation.
And they may be a green company, from their processes and all the stuff. They're building a brand new facility. I'm sure it's going to be some crazy metallic lead something or other. What's beyond platinum? I don't know. Adamantium.
Right, but then it comes down to them influencing their suppliers. Like Bradford was talking about, to make sure that cradle to grave control is in place, even if they're not the primary manufacturer of that subcomponent.
Okay. All right, moving on. There is a new cabal of LCD manufacturers. I like that word, cabal. Toshiba, Hitachi, and Sony.
You're easily amused.
I am easily amused. Cabal, yes. Although it's a Japanese company, so I'm sure there's a Japanese word for cabal. What they're doing, guys, is they're coming together. Toshiba, Hitachi, and Sony, which we've talked about Sony's issues before. They're coming together in a joint venture to make small and medium-sized LCDs and tablets, tablet PCs, and smartphone LCDs. Here's the interesting part about this that I thought, besides the fact that it's Toshiba, Hitachi, and Sony. They're getting a subsidy from the Japanese government to compete with the rivals from Taiwan and South Korea. Is this... First of all, is this a good idea for these three to come together? And secondly, is this something we're going to see as an idea to kind of flower into other countries backing their guy or their company, the companies that are within their four walls? Something like, do you see China coming forth and giving their companies subsidies? Do you see the manufacturers in Korea giving their companies subsidies to start flooding the marketplace with $10 LCDs?
Well, I guess I'll jump in a little bit here, and I'm not surprised, and I think it's one of those things of, I think every country does it in various ways, and I think this was to some degree hit the tipping point more after the earthquake hit. They needed something to revitalize the economy and the electronics market there, because I think that's definitely been impacted by the earthquake and the fact that they had this lag where they couldn't produce anything. So people started looking at other vendors, and so all of a sudden South Korea and China started coming in. So I think it's a logical move to kind of kickstart some creation of new technologies and creations of new jobs, the same way that here in the States, there's a technology corridor that has tax breaks if you build a company here, and we're going to give like we've done for solar and other companies. Not saying it's good or bad, just it's a fact that we all kind of do it. And I think it's here what they're hoping to get is that the economy of scale will make them be able to push up against the other brands. And realistically, I think we all know that at some point an LG display versus a Samsung display versus a Vizio display versus all these other ones, there's the same gut electronics in there. And I think they're just being more upfront about it in terms of let's just build this together and get the economy of scales. I think it's a good move by the Japanese government for their people. I'm not sure if it's a good move for the business world in general, but I do understand why they're doing it. And what they're hoping to get out of it, in my opinion, is getting some growth back into their electronics markets.
And that would be good. George, is this a good idea for the Japanese government?
Obviously the Japanese government thinks so, and it thinks that their economy is going to benefit from this. I think it also is sort of the pressure from what they call the China syndrome, I want to call it, the China model, where the government China owns a lot of those businesses, even though there's some free market, they're controlling it. And some of that pressure is being put upon these other manufacturers in other countries to say, we need to do something similar without looking like we're, the catchphrase political in this country and too socialist, but enough to say we're stimulating and helping free businesses move forward. What it comes out to be, I don't know, but it also to me seems like a way of also sort of shoring up the traditional hardware supply chain.
Yeah.
Maybe very Apple-esque there, saying, all right, let's shore up our methods of being able to build, deliver, and obtain the raw parts in a way that makes us competitive. And time will tell.
Well, and this would be no different than the U.S. government, subsidizing corn or giving a farmer money not to raise hogs one year. I mean, it's kind of the same thing. But you may raise a good point with the China syndrome. I like that, by the way. It's them, the country owning the supply chain and owning the things. Real quickly, and this is something that I just found fascinating. From CE Pro, kind of dovetailing onto the LCD, plasma sales apparently have increased by 17%. I'm going to ask both of you a stupid question. I thought about a year ago, I read that plasma was dead.
Yep.
Did anybody else read that?
Yeah, I remember reading that one.
And so
although what I did, I went out and I bought a plasma as soon as I saw that. So.
This comes from Quixel Research. They says that plasma sales have come up 17% in the first half of 2003, and increasing revenue 3% over year to year. And they also, by the way, in the same report says LCDs are down. Again, I thought that a year ago, or maybe even longer than that, around the time that Pioneer said that they were getting out of the business, that plasma was dead. Is it back, or is it just an uptick because the prices are down? Because, quote unquote, it's dead.
I have a few opinions on that. Surprise.
That's why we're here, George.
I wouldn't have guessed that
one. So here's two things I was thinking about when I first read that article. One, I think that the LCD market is fairly saturated. I mean, LCDs are everywhere and in everything. Mm-hmm. In fact, they're even on large billboard display type things. One of the things I hear about with a lot of people who do really good high def or install really, really fine high def stuff in their homes is that LCDs smear a little bit on very fast action, right? Mm-hmm. Depending on the model and stuff. So that might be part of the technicality, and it looks better in HD. They're glorious. They're beautiful. But I also feel like there's a social aspect here, and that is we're still in the quote-unquote new frugality where, installers are not putting in the massive home theaters at the rate and ratio they were with the super rich. And it's not just because every super rich person has what they need already. It's that some are looking to not look, ostentatious in their wealth and spending. There's all kinds of reports on MSNBC and others saying that the new wealth are getting more ostentatious in their vacations. But I think there's still something of that nature of, I don't want to build an entirely custom-made home theater that looks like it's the recreation of a Venice opera house. They're going to say, well, we're going to make a popcorn machine. It's going to be very nice, but instead of an LCD screen, we're going to put in a nice plasma because that's the ultimate I can have without looking like I spend $1 million on something just for something I look at an hour a day, or whatever it is. And I do think that maybe part of that's there is that it's cheap enough in the sense that it's not outrageous. It's being pushed because it's a nice profit margin for a lot of installers, just like the old flat panel mounting days. But there is also that social aspect of the new frugality, but not being so.
And I'll agree with you on all that, but I also think there's another reason that plasmas are making a comeback. They're less expensive, but also if the non-high-end going through the integrator, the guy who walks into Best Buy or the other large box sale houses, and you see a football game on the TV, on the display on the weekend, to be honest, in my opinion, the plasma has less jerkiness. It looks more fluid than the LCD, as we talked about. And I think that's as much of an impact as anything else, because the guy's going to walk in and go, this is $900, that's $900, but look, I don't see any trails after the football.
Yeah.
And I think that a lot of the consumers aren't caring if it's plasma or LCD. They're caring that they get a sharp picture. Because I kind of use the example of my mother. If I ask her what kind of TV she has, she says she has a GE. They don't care. They just want a nice picture.
Right.
I'm sorry, your mother has a GE?
She actually doesn't. I got her a new one since then, but she still thinks she has the GE. My mom has. If I could find her a rotary cell phone, I would.
Believe it or not, I actually remember those.
I remember my Zenith. Okay, that was. I liked my Zenith.
Quality goes in before the name goes on.
Yes.
Well, even myself, I bought a plasma when I was upgrading my home. My family room. It was, one was the affordability. Two was the picture quality. Sure, it's heavier. It consumes a little bit more energy.
But not much more. Not anymore.
Not much more. No. And by and large, even against the LED displays, the backlit LCD stuff, I still found that the plasma, the color reproduction, the contrast ratios, everything was superior to that of any of the LCD technologies.
I would totally agree with that. That's one thing that I kind of bemoaned it a year ago because I have been a big fan of plasma displays. Just in general. I mean, they do. They just look better. And it comes down to the different types of technology.
Right.
One is emissive and one is transmissive. One is a giant digital stained glass window, and that's the LCD. And the other one, it actually creates the colors. And I think that has a lot to do with it. Now, I'll say this. Once the LED panel manufacturers start getting on the ball, or the OLED manufacturers get on the ball, and you give me a 25 or a 40-inch OLED that is not $50,000, then that'll give plasma a run for its money from a price standpoint and from a quality standpoint.
Right.
But that's just...
Now, just for my edification, what do you guys have in your houses? Is it LCD, plasma, or LED?
I have a Samsung 50-inch plasma in my house, and I'm thrilled with it.
George, what is in the Tucker den?
I have two LCDs.
And I also have two LCDs as well. And I did it by looking at the picture. It's more of just, we're all buying LCDs, but did we buy it because they're LCDs or because we thought the picture looked good?
Did I say LCD? I thought I meant plasma. Yeah.
Yeah, you said plasma.
Okay, just making sure. I do. Now, that being said, I do have an LCD upstairs
in the bedroom.
But in my family room where we watch our movies and our regular TV, that's the plasma. So.
I have to say that I've been off plasmas just because they were so expensive for my budget. In a size that would be decent for me because I don't watch much sports, but what I do watch is hockey, and there is definitely, even with the nice units that I have, when you get in close, that streaking, that little jerky, that shows up really a lot. And it's sort of, you get accustomed to it and you just figure out how to blind it out of your head. But I would love to have, even a 30-inch plasma where I could watch my hockey.
Is that a visual precedence effect?
I think partly yes, and it just is so fast, and when they pan,
Yeah, or you could do like I do and spend way too much for the 240 hertz refresh rate, so the hockey looks good.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. That's exactly right. When you could have gone for the plasma at a third the price or half the price.
Yeah, but there was a wife acceptance factor, which is, of course, the ultimate factor in all.
Yeah,
Yes,
I think we could all agree on that one.
Yes.
That's why there's not a projector in my basement.
Yeah. Moving on, George sent this, and I thought it was kind of interesting. It was from MSNBC, if I'm not mistaken. Sony's new products doomed to mediocrity. It's by Wilson Rothman, and the author goes through a number of I'm not going to say horrible products because, as I've said before, I think there was a time when you just said the word Sony and you immediately thought of quality. But some of these products are silly, and I'm not sure that either the market is ready for them or that these are fully developed products. George, why don't you take us through at least one or two of them, and we can each kind of go around and give our own 2 cents on some of these, the smartphone, the reader, the tablet, and the wonderful 3D, which is awesome.
My biggest disappointment is with all of their digital video / MP3 type players. They are the originator of the mobile audio device, right? I mean, your Walkman was a big deal, and they never progressed past
that.
The fact that that's what they were doing. I mean, they tried to do their DCC for a while to fight it. Remember DCC, digital compact cassette, Philips and Sony?
No.
With your ID markers?
Don't remember that one.
We're dating ourselves now.
Wow.
Yeah, well, they this is during the time of the DATs. And DAT, of course, is a professional standard, and it's very expensive, but you've got that, 12-second to finding a track on a very long tape, or not even that long. It had those ID markers. Well, DCC was similar. And it required special heads and all this other stuff, and it was a complete and utter out-of-the-box failure. Didn't even
But
sell, right?
it did have the one advantage of you could also play regular cassettes in it, which is why they were banking on it.
Right, this is true. You couldn't play DCC in an older unit, but you could play, the crossover stuff.
Just for the record, guys, there's a number of listeners going, "What's a cassette?"
Yeah.
Not that many.
Those are pieces of rust with glue on Mylar.
There you go. When you pass a magnet, they go in different positions.
Yeah, you know what? There's 3 or 4 different products I can think that fits that description too. So,
Yeah.
including 8-track.
Right.
The reason I brought that up, not to interrupt you, George, but I think that was one of the reasons that Sony embraced that was they looked at it as an upgrade path for their existing Walkman market base.
But they were doing it at the same time as CDs coming out, and it really just,
Right.
I mean, look at their litany of stuff. There was mini disc, DCC. I mean, DAT they got and Beta they got successful in the pro markets with, but that's not the market share they were looking for. Nor it probably took them decades more to get the return on the investment. And they just seem to not be getting, again, the customer's desire. Sony, much like Apple at times, Apple understands what customer desires are and will really make an effort to provide those features. Sony seems to be saying, this is how we make it. Deal with it.
Well,
It's the Microsoft mistake, right? It's Microsoft mistake. What was Zune? Zune was them saying, we can also do this, but here's how you do it. No.
You're absolutely right. They're taking the Me Too approach. But you just said something that just triggered this to me, and that is Apple gets the consumer because they're delivering not just the device, but the turnkey package. It's here's my device, here's the content that goes on it, here's everything that you need to use this, and you don't get that from Sony. You don't get that in their video products, you don't get it in their audio products, you don't get it in their e-readers. That's why the Amazon Kindle does so well as an e-reader, because they are the content provider for the device.
And actually, I agree with you, but I think that Sony lost it. I think they used to do it. And I'm going to go back to something we talked about a couple minutes ago with the wife acceptance factor. Even though I work for one major consumer electronics manufacturer, up until about 6 months ago, my entire home theater was all Sony. I mean, display, CD player, Blu-ray player, it was a PlayStation, decoder, receiver, everything. The reason was it was just that, a turnkey system. The single remote that controlled the entire Sony system was what made it feasible and usable for everyone. And I think they took their eye off that ball and went in too many different locations and didn't do the let's do a system. Because like you said, the e-reader, they weren't I think they were pretty close to first, but it wasn't an easy solution. It was, I looked at one and went, this is too much work.
Well, it was because, they handle a lot of different formats, but it was you buy this and then you go find stuff to put on it.
Right. They looked at it like a CD player. And it's not necessarily bad, but it's a different model. And I just kind of come back to the whole iTunes thing and iPod. For those of us who remember way back when iPods didn't work on Windows machines.
Right.
And the whole reason was exactly that. The entire experience of the iPod was designed to sell more Apple desktop machines.
So do you guys see what's happening here? Earlier we were talking about different manufacturers and products and one superior over the other and the cultures. And I think we're seeing the same parallel or the same issue here is
Sony.
With Sony that there are other companies that just get the end user. All things created equal, the Kindle does the same thing that the Sony e-reader does, that the Nook does, that all these other competitive products are capable of doing, but Amazon gets the end user experience. They've got that culture, they just get it. And I think somewhere along the line Sony lost that, and I think you hit that on the head, Bradford.
Well, and it also may just be the fact that Sony is, I don't know, an aging company. It sounds weird saying that, but they are an aging company that had a market share for so long that, again, back to George's Microsoft analogy, that's a really good analogy because, now they've kind of, been stuck where they were and they're playing catch up. So, on to one of Sony's competitors, Sharp. And this has come from our guys over at our buddies over at Rave Publications. Sharp is debuting the wireless TV line, and I'm quite excited about this. Everything is wireless except for power. What it is, it's basically everything from the signal and control and the whole shebang. It's something called Freestyle TV. You can send the signals up to 50 feet away, so you can have your box over in your nightstand for your bedroom one, or in the console. You have the pretty little picture console, and have the entertainment center over to the side. Michael, you're an integrator. Are you excited about not pulling cable, or is this too scary for you because it's wireless?
I'm a commercial integrator. I don't play in the residential market a whole lot, and due to the reliability issues in the RF space, we just don't. We don't go after wireless technology in most of our installations. Now, if they can come up with a solution that is definitely stable, and this may be, then we might take a serious look at it. But to date, I have not found a wireless technology that is stable enough for me to promote.
I wouldn't necessarily disagree with the wireless part, but there will come a day, in George or Bradford, you guys can correct me on this, there will come a day when wireless will be as solid as a wired solution. Or am I just silly in that?
I think you're silly. and
I was hoping you would say that, because I was going to if you didn't.
and here's the reason I say that. Not just to be flippant, but I have two Sharp TVs. I have one of them that has the predecessor to this with the internet. I put in a USB dongle, and it has an Ethernet port on it, and I can stream directly to it from Netflix and all these other things, and off it goes. However, having said that, because everyone in my neighborhood has Wi-Fi, and I have Wi-Fi in my house, I just don't get good reliability. And I think that as wireless becomes more prevalent, you're going to get an overall degradation of the system. Kind of like the way that, when there was only a couple radio stations way back when in the 60s and 70s, all the radios sounded pretty good. And then as we got more and more channels in, you started to get all sorts of problems. And I think that same thing's going to happen in the house. My first question with this wireless TV is, what happens if I have one in the living room and one in the bedroom? Would there be intermod between them? Mm-hmm. Does that mean I can stream from one to the other? There's all these little things. I honestly think all that Sharp's really doing is better packaging on their currently available streaming solutions that they have, which I got to give credit to them for. But having said that, I just did a whole lot of effort taking my entire home theater system and going from Wi-Fi 802.11a and 802.11n and going to hardwired. And I know networking and knew change the channels and how to avoid cross mod and use better line of sights and use better connection. And I was still frustrated with it. And I think most of the integrators and the home users are going to go, I can cut down on my service calls just by putting a cable in, because one 50-foot cable that costs $1.50 in Cat 5 cabling is going to save me how many tech support and calls in the process. So I think it's not going to be a big winner. I think it's a buzz factor.
Well, and I don't even know that it's necessarily just the video transport in this particular product in particular. It's an RF issue. There is only so much RF resources available to us. The airwaves only have so much space. And actually, if you go to the website, AVNation TV, there was a special that I did recently with a couple of gentlemen from Sennheiser. And we were talking about this issue specifically within the wireless microphone space. And George, I know that you've had some experience with this, that, if you're doing a live event, anytime you can wire a microphone, you're going to be much better off than trying to go wireless for everything. And I think the same holds true in the home and in the commercial AV space. Anytime you can wire it, you're going to have much fewer problems than whenever you go wireless.
Yeah, I want wireless HD and wireless video transmission to work within the home, and all of those things that you said are desirable. But I got to tell you, my one word for this that I've had every time someone mentions it is Brundlefly.
Excuse me?
Brundlefly? You're going to have to explain that one.
Brundlefly. Well, I wrote a blog post about this a couple of years ago when EE Times was doing a whole retrospective of the last 2 years of wireless video transmission and just calling them basically a failure. Anything that they came up with was a failure or not mature enough. And a couple of years later, it's still true. You can't really transmit that much of a bandwidth for all the reasons in that wonderful, by the way, I love that show with the Sennheiser guys about the white spaces.
Oh, thank you.
That you can't fit it all on that bandwidth. And eventually when it becomes saturated, even with the sell-off of the analog channels, it's going to be mostly data communication and stuff like that, you're still going to be problematic. For very short runs, maybe for the kids' room that you don't want wires in that playroom that you can just put to a display, that will work. Mm-hmm. I have no problem with it. But when you start getting into real HD and some of the stuff they want to release in the next specs in the next 2 years for HD and over HDMI and things like that, I'm just not satisfied that it'll keep up with it based on limited bandwidth, limited airspace, what it can actually modulate. Do I want to say freedom from copper and say, take that, China, you can't put my copper prices up anymore and I don't need you? Yes, I do, but it's not going to happen. And the last thing about this, I want to know what they have against Tesla. What do you mean no wireless power? Come on.
Yes.
I'm with you on that one. It's not truly wireless until you get the power.
To sum that up, though, I think that's something that came to mind to me when I was listening to the White Spaces show. Wireless transmission of data and material is the single most convenient thing we've ever developed for AV. It's also the least reliable format we've ever chosen to transmit stuff over. Mm-hmm. Even if we're talking off air from the 50s, that was pretty unreliable. Why are we going back to that? Even if it's local, it's still an issue.
Correct.
And I guess another question is, what problem is it solving? You still have to pull power, so you pull one Cat 5 cable. It's not as if you're going to move the display every 10 minutes like a wireless laptop. Typically the display's there and it stays there. I'm not sure it actually makes anyone's life better.
Right.
Actually, I was just looking at I looked it up yesterday. The Sharp Freestyle. Mm-hmm. And actually, Engadget had an article from April 11th, April this year, about how they actually have a Freestyle version in Japan that's a portable TV that uses DNLA and Wi-Fi as a portable TV. So your old days of having that little TV you brought to the game with the antenna, they actually do it over Wi-Fi.
Really?
In Japan for channels. Yeah, now, there used to be a video associated, but somebody made them take it down, obviously. But it was actually pretty cool. He just said, okay, hook it up to Wi-Fi, use my DNLA to get my material. So it's sort of like a Slingbox. Yeah. That's not.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. It's like doing Slingbox on an iPad almost at that point.
Yeah. And it sort of seems silly. You can't touch it. But, there's probably a market for it in somewhere. Maybe a hospital or some institution where you don't want that stuff established that way, but you can just move it around. But what's the real market? I don't know.
Right. Now, all that being said, and those are all very valid points, is that there's still going to be that occasional solution where you need a wireless, you're going into a historic building. You can't, they want a display. They don't want all the infrastructure in there. So I do see those applications, but I think all in all, it's something that's not going to be viable, and at least not any time in the near future.
Yeah, but and this is one of those ones where if any of you guys do this, or the listeners out there, I'm going to come after you for money. Just do power line Ethernet at that point, but you still got to power the display. Power line Ethernet's getting you 80 to 100 megabits now on some of the new technology, and same idea, and avoid the wireless.
Right. Until you hack it from the neighbors and all the security issues.
Before we get in trouble, we're going to move on. I've got three really smart audio guys here and production guys. So unless you guys are opposed to this, George, stop laughing because I called you smart.
Yeah, I don't know who he's talking to here.
I want to take a look at AVB, and a couple of different reasons. There was an article in AV Technology. One of the coolest and new things that Biamp came out with ran on AVB, and the product is escaping me now.
You're talking about the Tessera?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah.
Tesla was in my head, and so the Tessera.
And just to clarify, Biamp didn't develop
No, I didn't say they did.
Okay.
I didn't say they developed.
Right.
I said, but their new technology did have that.
Correct.
So I'll just pass it around. Whoever wants to pick it up first, give me, as an end user, some basics. What is AVB? What does it mean? What does it run on? And why is it the newest, coolest thing?
Hey, Bradford, you guys are really big on the AVB initiative. You want to take that one?
Yeah, I can take this one. It sounds funny. I actually have been involved in product development on this one, and we do sit on the Avenue Alliance, and Harman is on the is in the AVB consortium. So yeah, I know a little bit about it. But what's cool about the idea is, up until now, the vast majority of digital audio transports involving the network involved either taking existing Ethernet and kind of bending it to your will to make it work, or just using the Cat5 cabling and it's not actually, a true Ethernet packet. So what's happened since then is this is actually the next generation of Ethernet, where this is being built on to the 802.3 standard of Ethernet. So it's a very nice addition of that it will be a standard. What's also happened is, I'll use CobraNet as the example because at least in the commercial marketplace, that's kind of where everyone's familiar with it. It used to be you had to configure the network switches on your own and be the smarts in the position. And I spent a lot of time learning how to do that. Whereas now, the network becomes part of the AVB solution, and the network is aware that AVB is on the network and prioritizes accordingly. So instead of me having to go in and set up a couple VLANs and quality of service to be able to make sure that CobraNet flows quickly and that the email takes a little less time and gets a lower importance on it, now the switch puts together a defended cloud and says, I'm going to save 75% of the bandwidth specifically for AVB and give it better quality and do better timing. And it does things like fixed timing using network precision time protocol, which is, the numbers escape me at the moment, but it actually starts to use existing Ethernet technologies that started to speed up to make this work. So instead of kind of shoehorning audio into Ethernet, this is actually now the next generation where audio and video is the next generation of Ethernet. So it's actually a true standard. And there are a lot of companies on there. Biamp has the new product. The new Apple products that's shipping with Thunderbolt have the right silicone in there and the right chips so that they can actually do AVB directly from them. Oh, wow. Harman has some products that we're shipping with them. We even have a network switch that's shipping with them that we've partnered with Netgear on. And what's nice is for Netgear, it wasn't a brand new switch. It was new firmware, which seems small, but that's a huge thing from a manufacturing standpoint of you're not reinventing the wheel. You're just upgrading the wheel you have.
Yeah.
Well, the problem, the Netgear stuff, though, a lot of their switches aren't field upgradable firmware.
Yeah, you have to be a little smarter than the switch to put it in. I don't remember if I had to take the lid off or if I just did it through the console.
Right.
It's been a little while, and I've slept since then. But I didn't have.
So let me see if I hear you. This is not just an audio standard.
Correct.
This is audio and video. Okay, that's kind of cool.
It's audio, video, and then there's a control element to this as well. Is that correct, Bradford?
Control is separate. Most manufacturers, including Harman, are using the same Ethernet backbone to do control, but there is no...
It's not encapsulated in the same packets.
Yeah, it's not SNMP or any of these other standards. It's each manufacturer is doing their own. So, for instance, on the Crown product that we have under development, we released a press release about it a couple years ago, so don't have to worry about getting fired on that one.
Yeah, we don't want that.
Yeah.
It's a single network cable that has both control and audio transport on it. Other manufacturers are doing audio and control separately. Which one's right? It comes down to personal preference, but it's the same idea of you can interleave the data because it's just that at that point, data. And the amount of bandwidth you take for control is amazingly marginal compared to the amount of bandwidth that you take for audio and video. And Harman's actually already been shipping some of this product, believe it or not, into the car market, to the automotive market, because of we were talking about the wireless displays a couple minutes ago. In the automotive market, if you can drop a pound of copper out of a car, think about what that does to the gas mileage.
Yeah.
While doing AVB for rear seat entertainment or infotainment, all of a sudden became very usable to the car companies because now it's less copper in the car.
That's interesting.
And it's those things that you don't, and it's like going into the historic building instead of having to pull through video coax and audio lines, one Cat5 cable or 5E or Category 6 cable, at gigabit, and you have full bandwidth audio and full resolution video all in the same place and run power, and poof, you're done. I can easily see it helping everyone out in the installation process, not just in commercial, but also in home. And I think that's one of the things that actually gives AVB a whole bunch of opportunities, is if you look at some of the AVB sponsors or proponents, it's not just consumer brands, it's not just professional brands, it's both. Whereas a lot of times as commercial integrators or versus residential integrators, you kind of have the two different versions or the two different standards that don't work well together. You have SPDIF versus AES. They're close. One's balanced, one's unbalanced. You can convert them, all that good stuff. Whereas here, this is AVB, where it's the same for both, and you can do everything in both. And it's not a consumer format brought up to pro. It's not a pro format that's dumbed down to consumer. It's an audio video transport for all markets. And that's kind of a big thing because, to speak for the networking guys, I believe, and it's been a while since I read the study, there's something like 20 objects in the typical house that can be networked together. And the vast majority of people only network together 3 things because of how hard networking is for the average user. Yeah. That's why we're all integrators. But the switch companies are looking at how do we sell people more switches to go from the 5-port switch to the 20-port switch. Make it easier to put all this together. And if you can wirelessly go in and plug in all your audio devices and poof, they start talking, and you can get video from point A to point B, it's a win for the switch manufacturers as well as for the consumers.
Yeah.
Go ahead, George.
What does this do for quality? Maybe I had to mute for a second because I had someone walk in, but what kind of compression are we talking about, and what can we get out of it?
From my dealings, it's whatever data rates you want to do. I've done 96K. I've done 48K. It's the thing that's nice is to the Ethernet network, it's just data. So and since it's gigabit, you can just keep sending data down until you run out of time. So it's up to you as to if you want to compress it. We've done full non-compressed audio and video without an issue yet.
On a live Ethernet data network as well.
Yeah. Well, I guess the question is, what do you consider a live data network? It's like the video one I saw in the lab, the audio one I'm running in my office, and it's also the same computer that I'm doing word processing and email on.
Right, so it's the general network, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so, I'm one of the things that some people know about me is I come from multiple lives before I got into the AV industry. And, I started in the touring market, ended up in IT as a Cisco network engineer for Anheuser-Busch here in St. Louis, worked in their network operations center, got into broadcast television, and now back into AV. So just kind of a long way around.
And he used to be a princess at one point.
Yeah, I had the little Tinkerbell wings and everything. Wow, that's the title today. I am Tinkerbell.
No.
Oh, man.
Continue.
The worst thing about these mental images is you can't gouge out your eyeballs. It's still staged.
You can't unsee it, Bradford.
Right, that's absolutely right.
What has been seen cannot be unseen.
Right. So, my issue with all this... by the way, let me preface my statement by saying I am very excited about AVB. I have been asking for a medium to transport audio and video across the LAN reliably, in sync, in time with one another, low latency, for a long, long time. And, CobraNet was a good step in that direction, but it obviously had its limitations of 32 by 32. And now with AVB, we can go as high as, 420 by 420 in special configurations on audio. So that's just a tremendous benefit to the industry. I think this is going to be very viable in the dedicated installations where I can build my own network for it. I think it's going to be very viable in small deployments. But I think when we get into the enterprise network, when I'm doing large corporations, the core switches today aren't set up to handle the AVB protocols. And because you have to have special AVB switches in order to facilitate this, unless the big players like Foundry, Juniper, Cisco, HP can upgrade their firmware to handle the AVB packetization, I'm not going to see this in a large-scale corporate deployment.
Well, here's a question. Are there manufacturers of switches on this AVB council?
There are. Who is it? Cisco and Netgear are two of the big players right now.
So you would think then that they would increase and have the firmware and stuff like that.
But the issue is that they're special switches. Okay.
Well, actually, that's...
or am I misinformed?
No, you are correct. There are special switches, but in addition to Cisco and Netgear on the AVB steering or Avenue committee, there's also Xilinx and Broadcom and Marvell. which might not be household names unless you're a geek, but those are actually the silicone makers that make the
Correct.
Mac and the actual Ethernet hardware itself that they then sell to Cisco and Netgear.
Right.
So according to them, they've been selling hardware that can support that for a couple years now. It's just a firmware upgrade.
Okay, so if that's the case, then I am very excited about this because I've been kind of like, oh, AVB, yada, yada. I still have to build a dedicated network, big deal. But, if what you're telling me is true and they're going to be able to release firmware to upgrade the existing 6509 switch that my customer has in their data center, then that opens up a whole new world of opportunity.
And I don't know exactly which switches can be updated and which ones can't and all those things. That's all up to Cisco and Netgear and all that fun. But,
right.
I was amazed when I took my Thunderbolt computer out and looked in and did a little, and, at IEEE a couple weeks ago, an Apple guy actually did a demonstration of it. He took a standard laptop and went into the terminal, made a change, and poof, it was streaming AVB right off.
Nice.
With no change. And I'm like, that's where we need to get. But having said that, to kind of go back, because just like you, I have the network background. I was a Novell administrator, so I'm really dating myself.
Wow.
The converged networks for the enterprise-wide, I think, will still stay around, and I think that's also to some degree where CobraNet's still going to be a viable option because of the fact that you can run that on pretty much any 100 base T or fast or gigabit network just by setting up a VLAN becomes very useful to that market, and still gives you digital and gives you all those options and being able to route audio around. And I've seen that take off in the sports and arena facilities quite a bit. So I think that what's nice is a lot of the integrators are going to get bigger palettes rather than saying AVB, and CobraNet goes away. I think it's going to kind of be like, line level versus mic level signal. They both have their place and they're both used for specifics, and you get to pick which one's worth the right one for you.
Okay, go ahead, George.
One more question, but do you think that this AVB can make a run at some of the distribution systems that are put out from some of these manufacturers these days? There's a bunch of popular, digital or HD over the Cat 5 or the twisted pairs.
I think it can. I think it's going to be a little while. I kind of remember back to when CobraNet came on, and heck, just when digital in the home theaters came on, you had to buy a fiber optic cable. What's that? And I think it's going to be a couple year transition of everyone getting comfortable with it, but I definitely think it can make a run at it because I think there'll also be a certain amount of economy of scale. Right now, one of the downsides is you can't take an EtherSound product or brand A product or brand B product and then plug it into brand C. So like you can't take EtherSound and plug it into Aviom or plug that into CobraNet. And I think having this open non-licensed standard of AVB will actually make it a bigger change. So you'll be able to go, I like this brand's mic pre's, but I like this brand's DSPs. Oh, look, I can put the two together and be able to get the transport working.
Well, and what I'm excited about with this is and Tim kind of stole my phrase here a couple of weeks ago. This takes us one step closer to cloud-based switching. Both on the audio and the video side, because I have been yearning for the day that I can do away with my matrix switcher and I can put a device on the LAN that is a node, and I can simply use a server or a PC or whatever the case is to tell that node, send your signal over here, send your signal over there. And, and it's not just IPTV. It's full-blown matrix switching with audio and video and control all on the LAN.
And I can tell you Harman actually has a product that does that right now. It's not like off the shelf. We've partnered with the software company to create something called IDX, and it's exactly that. All of the paging and all of the video messaging gets done through the network. There is no central core switcher. There is no auto patch or cross-point matrix. It's all done via the network and via software. And, it sounds funny. If you've been to a Southwest Airlines recently, you've heard that system at work.
Mm-hmm. Well, before we get too excited and get rid of all of our switchers and our matrices, I am not from a computer background, so I'll say that. But
we forgive you.
Well, I appreciate that. One of the things I do understand, though, about computers and networks and switches and stuff is that from time to time, packets get dropped.
Yes.
I can't have that if I'm running, I don't know, Van Halen, and the lead singer's mic is on this AVB thing. His vocal can't drop out if a packet gets dropped. Is there any provision for that, or are you just telling me that AVB doesn't drop packets?
There's both.
Okay.
Because of the defended cloud, your likelihood of dropping packets is much less because it's given a higher priority as the packet itself is tagged as the most important packet.
Okay.
Having said that, there is work at hand on going to an IP-based and error correction, but that is not currently available. It's currently under development. So when that's going to be ready, I couldn't tell you. I'm not intimately familiar with it, but I do know it's under development.
Richard, I did a lot of touring and live staging events in my past lifetime, and I know that you still... not Richard. What did I say?
I don't know. It's George and Bradford
George.
on the line.
I don't know what I was thinking, George. I called you Richard. If I've got a live event, I'm not using IP as my transport medium for my front of house system and my monitor system. I might use it for ancillary distribution, but what say you on that?
You were talking to me, right?
He was, unfortunately.
Yeah, I called
George.
you Richard. I don't know why. You know why? Because I was sitting here.
Right.
I was tweeting with Richard Fergoza here a minute ago.
Michael, you cannot multitask.
No,
anymore.
I can't.
Ooh, something shiny.
Squirrel.
I have to say, I agree. At the current moment, who knows what the next couple of years will bring, and the reliability of all that, and the proof is in the pudding, as they say.
Right.
I agree. It would be maybe for talent foldback, or maybe it would be for comm link and communications instead of wireless or those XLR wired intercoms for the moment. But for a live show, I don't think I would use it for that, except for maybe the hallways of some reception area where we'd have a live event, but then I'd pipe in the music or some of the content from there. It's not mission critical.
Right.
Although,
Now,
Bradford, I do have a question for you.
okay, before we get to the question,
Yeah.
there have been a couple instances where people have done exactly that, gone mission critical with Cobranet for touring systems, as well as AVB for touring systems.
Yeah,
with,
I don't do
onstage audio.
Cobranet. I don't do Cobranet for touring systems either. Sorry.
I'll be
And
the
no,
first-
nothing against it. Yeah, I'm not discrediting. I'm just saying at the current moment, with doing something where you're going in and out of a venue. I don't know, maybe, but I think we'll see what time brings. So my question is not related to any of this, actually. It's actually related to the nomenclature or the terminology that the author in the article used. He kept referring to the flows. I have never heard this as a reference between, and what it sounded like he was saying is that the flow of the data from one device to another. But I've never heard this terminology. Is that something you're familiar with in the AVB world, or
This is.
Or was it a artistic license?
I have never used that term before either, so I think it was artistic license.
good? Because I was wondering why I had to go pee so often during the article, and I think I figured it out.
And
That was a long way around.
I do a whole lot more geek speak than marketing speak, so I'm talking with the engineers and we're talking, about that type of stuff. But I've never used the word flow talking about this. I've talked about data streams, but never flows.
Yeah, interesting. All right.
And also, I will say that at the upcoming CEDIA, Lee Minnick, who is also very involved with AVB, is going to be there if you guys want to ask him more questions in person. He's forgotten more about AVB than I probably know.
Very good. That's CEDIA. That's actually next week. On September
9th,
8th, 7th, 8th, 9th,
That's
and
right.
10th. So. All right, gentlemen, that is all the time we have. Bradford Benn, he is at Bradford Benn if you'd like to follow him on Twitter. He is an application expert for Harman, specifically the Crown division, but he's really smart in other areas. Also with us is George Tucker. He's the engineering coordinator for World Stage. He is at Tucker2s on Twitter. Michael Drainer is in studio with me. He is at Michael Drainer if you'd like to follow him on Twitter. My name is Tim Albright. I appreciate you listening. Check out avnation.tv if you would. And that is all the time we have for AV Week.